Ladies and gentlemen, with the Black Friday deals winding down, I know most of you have finished your bingo by now. Congratulations. So if you have yourself a 5-star, if you have yourself a 6-star artifact selector or otherwise, I want to help you make the most value out of that. So we have a brand new tier list coming at you. This one isn't live because it would take me just way too long to do it live. The system is really slow to vote. We have 150 artifacts in the game. And this is what makes, it's literally cutting off the screen. This is what makes the artifact selector at Black Friday and in the bingo so valuable. Most of the artifacts in the game are not good. So we're actually going to be ranking these in reverse order because I just cannot physically remember all of the artifacts that fit into the last two categories here, low value or decent. So we're going to split the rest of the good artifacts, which is honestly less than half of the remaining 150. So we're talking less than 75 artifacts into these 5 categories: PvP, PvE, ABX, ABL, support artifact, and then needs 3 to 4 star and needs 5 to 6 star. Actually, that's 6 categories. So there's so many categories. There's so many artifacts, dude. There's just way too many. But let's get started here. Adam Warlock absolutely needs the highest tier of artifact that you can possibly find for him because it is healing. It's super important. Same thing with Jean Grey. You want the highest possible artifact for her. You can sort of flip-flop this. I think this is a pretty good argument there. Wolverine is in similar form where you want the highest possible artifact. Now, don't get it confused. Does this mean that you can't use the character if you have a 3-star or 4-star? No, that's not what that means. It just means that as you keep going up, the value keeps going up as well. The value continues to rise with the character's artifact going up higher. Same thing goes for Carnage, and same thing goes for Strife as soon as I find him. So these 5, in my opinion, are some of the best artifacts right now in the game. Not only are these characters very meta, but these artifacts are extremely powerful. Now, as you'll notice, most of these artifacts are PvP oriented because that is where you win by degrees, right? You don't really win by degrees in PvE. You either win or you lose, but you can sometimes win overwhelmingly. PvP, that doesn't really happen so often, and there's a lot more narrow victories and narrow losses. So that's why every little bit absolutely helps. Ghost Rider, although he is a very good artifact and very similar to Wolverine and Carnage, I think he can still get by with a 3 or 4-star artifact. I mean, you could certainly make the argument that more is better, but they're still very good and sort of, you know, less so meta, but still very, very good with that version of the artifact. Same thing goes for Hulk, and same thing goes for Hela. Hela's actually seen a lot of renewed value because of Otherworld Battle, and because when you have a lot of the incumbent meta banned, a lot of heroes pop up and creep up, like Spider-Man and Ghost Rider, etc. Warriors of the Sky come back, Cersei comes back, etc. And so because of that, until Kang or any of these other native tier 3s get a bump, Hela is going to be a very good option to sort of check a lot of these heroes. But speaking of Cersei as well, we're going to go ahead and find her because she also needs to be on this list, where having at least a 3 or 4-star version of her artifact is very useful. There she is. Very good because it gives her that revive. Same thing goes for Magic, who I saw just here with the Immortality artifact. Same thing also goes for Gore, who, once I find him, also needs a version of his artifact, but it doesn't need to be super high up because, as long as you have the effect, so to speak, it helps. And then the last one we're going to put on this list is Sunbird. Now, Sunbird's not very good, but if you want to run a Warriors of the Sky team, you have to use him. And then, yeah, his artifact comes in very, very handy to give all of the Warriors of the Sky more HP, which is very, very good. So moving along to support characters. We do have quite a few of them, so we're just going to rapid fire find them. We have Valkyrie, basically the best support in the game. We have M'Baku, also very, very good support, sort of generic support, and that's why the generic ones are ranked more highly because they apply to everyone. Black Cat's fantastic, even though she's stuck at tier 2, unfortunately. Nick Fury's is also pretty good. There is Sin right there. We also have the more specific, more niche artifacts for characters like Agent Venom and She-Hulk. These, don't apply to as many characters, but they're still pretty good. You also have Scarlet Spider, aka Chasm. Good artifact for the Spider-Verse. We have this one, which is basically just for Ghost Rider right now, but it's still not bad. And then we have the only artifact in the game that actually heals your allies. It's hardly a support artifact. It's stretching the word and the meaning of support here. But yes, this is technically a support artifact. Then we move on to ABX and ABL. So here's the thing, and this is what I need you guys to understand. This tier list is not saying that Adam Warlock's artifact is the best in the game, and then Ghost Riders is better than Valkyries. Like, these are not ranked, up and down. They're ranked side to side, and they are just in their sort of category. So for whatever reason, right, if you want to use Spider-Man for PvP, you need his artifact, at least 3 or 4 stars. If you want to use Ghost Rider for PvP, you need his artifact, at least 3 or 4 stars. So that's what these means. Like, if you want to use these characters in PvP, and that's generally speaking where artifacts are basically needed, you don't really need artifacts for PvE, but you can absolutely make the argument that for ABX and ABL, you sort of need artifacts, especially if you're trying to maximize your score. And some of these artifacts specifically will enhance damage to enemies above 50%, which applies 100% of the time for ABX and ABL, because you cannot kill Searcher, you cannot kill the Frost Beast, because they continuously heal. So that's what I really need to get across here. I'm not saying that some of these artifacts are just better than others, but what I am saying is that depending on what you want to do with the character, it's very important to acknowledge what kind of what artifact is really going to help you achieve that the most effectively and the most efficiently. So yeah, I don't want to mislead people. I don't want to overstate the value of artifacts, but I also don't want people to think that, okay, yeah, this artifact is ranked up high, so it's very, very good, and if I'm going to build the character, I need the artifact. If you're not going to use the characters here in ABL and ABX, if you're not going to use them for ABL and ABX, and if you're just playing casually, then by all means, you can skip their artifacts, right? They're not needed. I would argue these are needed, but specifically for PvP, right? Because, again, with PvE, you don't win by small margins. You just sort of, you win or you lose, right? And you can kind of crush the boss. With PvP, it's a little bit more tricky, and you have to sort of do this tightrope walk to victory. So for ABX, ABL, if you want to maximize your scores, these are really the artifacts, especially the first 5, that are very, very vitally important, right? You have 4 extremely meta characters for ABX and ABL, and their artifacts range, Cable and Loki's are similar to each other. We have, Magneto's. We have this one that increases damage to aliens and creatures, and then we have increased damage to enemies above 50%. We have this Instinct crit damage and crit rate, which just amplifies his damage because he's constantly critting. Moon Knight's is the same as Captain Marvel's. And I tried to rank these in terms of how relevant they are for ABX and ABL and how much these things sort of impact their score. I guess you could probably put Cable a little bit further back, and maybe, I don't know if you'd want to swap Magneto and Dr. Octopus perhaps, so maybe it looks something like that. Now, one notable absentee from that list, who is a god of ABX and ABL, is Luna. And really the reason why I'm not putting Luna any higher than decent, even though she is an ABX ABL god, is because her artifact is not really that good. Like, yes, it does convert some of her cold resist to cold damage, which does give her more damage, which does help your score, but it's very irrelevant, right? The difference between players that are scoring at very high levels comes down to the rest of the build besides the artifact, and it comes down to how well they play, right? How well they can mechanically control Luna. It doesn't come down to the artifact being 5 stars or 6 stars or 4 stars or whatever. It has a very almost insignificant impact. So I guess that's the word I was looking for earlier. These artifacts in these tiers right here are going to have these specific impact that's going to positively improve your character's odds of having a successful run in the content that they're looking at here. So here we go. We have Iron Man and PvE. PvE, in my opinion, here for this list is just a catch-all term for characters that are pretty good, but they're not meta in a specific way. And so while these artifacts are good and they will enhance the character's damage or some other thing about the character, they're by no means needed, right? By no means do you need these artifacts for these characters to perform well, but they are good characters for PvE, and these artifacts do enhance their damage in some demonstrable way. You can sort of measure that. But because it's not PvP, you don't need any of these artifacts. I mean, you can argue you don't need any artifact, but for some of these characters, obviously, as we already highlighted, if you want to use them for specific game modes like PvP, you would need to invest in those artifacts specifically. For PvP, it gets a little bit more specific again because PvP has specific requirements. I know I'm sort of repeating myself a lot here, but it begs repeating because it's such a long list. So Kang, you want that increased damage to heroes and villains. With Blue Dragon, still pretty good for PvP, I would say. You want that increased damage and damage reduction. For Destroyer, you want the Reflect, right? The Reflect that makes you heal, which is really, really nice. You want to heal based on your Reflect, which just makes him so much more powerful than he already is. Emma Frost, you know, she gets basically all of her reflect from that, which is really nice. We all know Gilgamesh's thing, it's the HP, which is the same thing as Man Thing. I don't want to put them side by side, but it is the same effect, right, where it increases your maximum HP. We have Sabretooth and Mr. Sinister, which both get the immortality tag. I just think they're not quite as good as the rest of the immortality bros up here, like Magic and Hela. We also have Absorbing Man, who also gets the heal reflect thing that Destroyer got. We have Spider Gwen, who gets iframe ignore and something else I can't quite remember, but it's decent for PvP. It's decent. I don't think it's necessary. Got Black Widow over here with the dodge. We've got Juggernaut with the same thing as Man Thing and Gilgamesh. We have Ancient One, who's not bad for, like, is pretty good for PvP, so this amplifies the damage. And then we finish off with Nova. So again, these artifacts basically, right, these artifacts here that you're looking at, I think these are really, generally speaking, the only artifacts you should consider from the selector. Genuinely speaking, I don't think any of the artifacts here are really worth selecting unless you love the character or unless you're trying to do something really off meta, you know. So for example, Miles Morales, right? It's a really good artifact. It's the same as Echo's, it's the same as Spider-Man's, it's the same as Black Widow's. It gives him that like infinite, right, like that infinite dodge, or not infinite, but you know, the supreme dodge. So if you wanted to make Miles Morales for PvP, then yeah, you would need this artifact. But I'm not going to base my ranking of Miles Morales, who is typically a PvE character. I'm not going to base that on you know, whether you're going to use him for PvP or not, because that would be kind of ridiculous. Same thing goes sort of for Thanos. Is his artifact like good? Like, it increases his damage, sure, but it doesn't, you know, it's not needed for PvE. It's not needed for PvP in any regard, and it's just kind of decent. It's just kind of good. So yeah, I wouldn't really, again, I wouldn't consider any artifacts outside of these if you have a selector, unless you already have all of these, or you're doing one of the aforementioned off-meta builds, or you're trying to get rank 1 for a character. I wouldn't even consider Luna, Thanos, and Miles. And honestly, I wouldn't even consider, I would probably, my cutoff point would be like Mr. Sinister, to be honest. Mr. Sinister and up is what I would consider using a selector on. Everything else, I mean, I will rank the rest of them, but all of the rest of these are just, in my opinion, they're kind of aggregate low value. There are some that are just genuinely better than others, but I'll do my best to sort of highlight that here. But otherwise, they're just pretty bad. Like, some of these are just really, really bad. Yeah, Colossus is good. It gives him a heal. This gives him max HP, but some of these are just tremendously bad. And these characters just, you know, yeah, they're not gonna, the artifact itself is not gonna carry enough weight to make these characters relevant in any way. So yeah, that basically is what it comes down to. Unfortunately, we do have a lot of fodder artifacts in the game, and that's just something that you need to, you know, navigate, and that's kind of why I advocate so hard for the selectors, because they're actually really good. Like, the selectors are genuinely good. But yeah, don't conflate the character's value with the artifact's value, because there are a lot of really good characters that just have bad artifacts. Perfect example of this, Scarlet Witches is pretty good. Perfect example of this, Odin and Doctor Strange. I can't find Doctor Strange at the moment here, but very good characters, right? Very, very mediocre artifacts. Borderline unusable artifacts. And that's just kind of how they decided to balance things. I don't really know why they did that. But yeah, it is what it is. In the future, maybe some of these characters, like if MODOK got a tier 4 and became relevant, I would probably rank his artifact higher, because it's actually really good. I think it's just the same or similar to Dr. Octopus's. So if they made MODOK like the new Blast villain meta for ABX and ABL, then sure, yeah, MODOK would have a chance to dethrone Magneto, and his artifact is the same as Dr. Octopus's, which is really good against the Frostbeats and Surtur. But as it stands right now, that's just not the case, and you know, it's foolish to rank the artifact that high when we know the character cannot compete in basically, you know, in any of those realms. So that's essentially what it comes down to here. We got a lot of these to put down. Man, some of these are just so bad. It's just like a generic attack increase, and it does basically nothing else. I wish there were more small support artifacts, even something like Nadia's, where it just gives the team a little bit of a heal. I think that would be a lot nicer than some of these artifacts, the way that they're designed to basically just be a really boring buff that doesn't really do much else. So yeah, it's unfortunately the state of artifacts, but you have to You gotta take the good with the bad. If you're wondering why, by the way, why these artifacts exist, it is essentially to sort of cloud the selectors, right? And crowd the randomness when you aren't using selectors. It increases the values of selectors for sure, but it also means that when you're not using selectors, your chances of getting something bad are, you know, extremely amplified. So that's essentially what it comes down to here. Look at that. This is why I didn't want to start the video by doing this. More than half of the artifacts are just not good. Not good. Now, again, having said that, I selected Scarlet Witch's artifact with my selector a couple of years ago. I selected Doctor Strange's as well. One of them was for ABX/ABL at the time, or ABX at the time, and one of them was for personal reasons because I really liked the character. I also selected Thanos' artifact, I believe, or maybe I pulled it out of a chest. But again, you got to be careful, and yeah, that's why these tier lists exist. So yeah, hit me up in the comments down below. Let me know what you think, what your opinions are on the tier list. Thank you so much for watching. Good luck with your selectors. Smash the like button if you enjoyed the content, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.